Driving down the country road, windows roll down.
Welcome to this episode of Country Road Detours, podcasting from the front porch of the South.
The fresh air is so...
Today, journalist and podcast host for Fission Nuclear Report Michael Butler will be interviewing John Rose, cartoonist for one of the longest-running comic strips in American history, Barney Google and Snuffy Smith.
On this country road, my spirit feels so alive.
Barney Google and Snuffy Smith is one of the longest-running comic strips in history. Created by Billy DeBeck in 1919. The strip followed Barney Google, a cigar-smoking, sports-obsessed, poker-playing, girl-chasing ne'er-do-well. By October of that year, the strip was syndicated by King Features and appeared in newspapers across the country. In 1934, Barney met Snuffy Smith, a hillbilly character who quickly surpassed him in popularity. Shortly after, the comic strip became known as Barney Google and Snuffy Smith. In 1942, the strip was taken over by DeBeck's longtime assistant, Fred Lasswell, who continued drawing it until his death in March 2001. Lasswell, a master of sight gags, further developed the hillbilly characters from Hootin Holler. After Lasswell's passing, John Rose, who had inked the strip for Lasswell, took over as the cartoonist and has been continuing the tradition since 2001. And now, let's join Michael Butler, guest host for Country Road Detours, as he interviews John Rose, the cartoonist for Snuffy Smith and Barney Google.
Well, I'm talking now with John Rose, and John is the modern-day custodian, guardian, and creator of the oldest and one of the oldest and best-known comic strips in the world, Snuffy Smith and his friend Barney Google. And welcome, John. Welcome to Country Roads.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, we're glad to have you. It's very exciting for us to be able to talk to you today. You are the third cartoonist to oversee the production of the Snuffy Smith cartoon. This started in 1919. It's over 100 years old now, which makes it one of the longest running cartoons in the world, and so it's pretty significant. How about telling us a little bit about how you got started with this and your association with the previous cartoonist? How did you get this gig?
Well, first I'll say the comic strip was created by Billy DeBeck in 1919, like you said, and Billy DeBeck's assistant was Fred Lasswell, and Fred started working with Billy in the probably in the 20s or 30s. And it ended up when Billy passed away, Fred took over the comic strip and did a wonderful job with it. And I was Fred's inking assistant. I started working with Fred in 1998. And so I can tell you how basically the way I ended up working with Fred is I'm a member of the National Cartoonist Society, and every year we have an annual meeting. And years ago, probably would have been in 97 or so, we had a meeting, and I was talking with the fellow cartoonist, and he was an editorial cartoonist, and he told me that he was also working as an assistant on the Blondie comic strip. And I didn't really know that comic strip cartoonists use assistants, and I was also doing editorial cartoons at the time, but I'd always wanted to get into comic strips and create a comic strip. And so when I came home from that meeting, I talked with my wife about it, and I thought, maybe this is an avenue I could try to pursue, to be an assistant on a comic strip. And the first comic strip I thought of was Barney Google and Snuffy Smith. I'd grown up reading it. It was always one of my favorite strips. It was always wherever we lived. We lived in a lot of different places in Virginia when I was growing up, but Snuffy was always in the newspaper. And And so anyway, I didn't know Fred Lasswell, but I did have access to his contact information because I was in the National Cartoonist Society, and he was too. And so I decided I would just try to. I drew some character sketches, just some sample drawings of the characters. Then I also I think I did a Sunday comic strip, and I sent that along with some other things that I had done over the years, like I had newspaper illustrations, some kids' books that I'd done, other things like that. I just put it in a big package. This was 1998, so I just mailed it off to Fred, and U.S. mail, just the snail mail, and as a cartoonist, you get a lot of rejection. You know, you'll send stuff out and you'll get a no, you know, thanks, but no thanks, or maybe you won't hear anything at all. And Fred was he was a legend in the comic strip business. Everybody loved Fred, and he had been drawing the comic strip so long, everybody knew him. And I really just expected maybe that I either wouldn't hear back, or maybe I'd just get a thanks but no thanks, or maybe just an email or a letter, rejection letter. But anyway, about 2 weeks passed since I mailed that, and I was eating lunch. It was a Saturday. I was eating a nutritious lunch of Cocoa Puffs. I even remember what I was eating: Cocoa Puff cereal. And the phone rang, and I picked up the phone, and the voice on the other end said, you know, "Hello, John. This is Fred Lasswell." And I about choked on my Cocoa Puffs. And he said, "I got the packet of samples that you sent me, and I really like the way you draw big noses." I mean, word for word, that's exactly what he said. "You like the way I drew big noses?" And then, so really that ended up, I think I sent he asked for more samples. I sent some more things. We kind of went back and forth with some things for a few weeks. And it ended up maybe 6 weeks later or so, he hired me as his inking assistant. So I became his inking assistant in 1998. And kind of basically the way that worked, Fred lived in Tampa, and I was in Virginia, but he was very into technology. So he didn't mind that we lived far apart. So he would like sketch out the comic. He wrote the comic strip, and then he'd sketch it out and then fax me the sketch. And then I would take it off my fax machine. And then I would do the finished inking and scan it in the computer and send it back to him. And, you know, like I said, we lived far apart from each other, one in Florida, one in Virginia, and then the syndicate was in New York City. But he was really into technology, and so I would just email the comics that I had inked back to him. Then he would proof them, tell me if I needed to correct anything or if he liked everything. And that's kind of funny, you know, if let's see, if he didn't like what I was doing, he would say, you know, have you been looking out the window? Quit looking out the window and get back to the drawing board. But if he liked what I was doing, he would say, "That's fine as a frog's hair," you know, something silly like that. You know, he was quite a character.
Let me ask you this. Sorry, excuse
Yeah.
me for interrupting you, but let me ask you this, John. You talk about inking the comic strip. What exactly is that? What does that mean? Does he sends it to you in a form, and what you say you ink it? What do you do when you do that?
So basically, then what he would do, he would send a sketch, which would have been a pencil sketch probably, but because he faxed it to me, then it was, you know, it was a fax document. I would copy that on my copier, and then I would just ink along with a pen or a brush, with some India ink, some permanent ink like that. I would ink those lines, shade them in, you know, make sure everything looked just right. So it's basically inking is that's kind of describes what inking is.
How do you get where does the color come from? How do you get the color in the cartoons?
The color then now is applied in Photoshop on the computer. Yeah,
All right.
that's how it's done now.
Well, to be a cartoonist, a good cartoonist, you've got to be all around creative. You have to be a good artist and be able to create the images, but you also got to be a writer and be able
Right,
to write
right.
the kind of the story that goes with the cartoon.
Mhm.
How does that happen? How does the story unfold in a cartoon?
Um, it really just requires a lot of thinking. You just got to come up with gags. A lot of times with the this comic strip, most of the time it's a gag a day, like a joke a day. Um, Sometimes I'll have week-long storylines, like I'll have Barney Google come in for a week, or I did a special week-long series over Christmas where I had like Snuffy's Christmas Carol, and I kind of uh, did a takeoff on Dickens' Christmas Carol with the characters, but most of the time, it's just a joke a day, and in my case, it's just writing the down. I always keep a sketchbook, so it just kind of looks like chicken scratching like this. Nobody else could probably understand it, but I just jot notes down and refer back to those, and hopefully, some days I'll have more ideas than I need. Some days, because some days I won't have as many as I need. So, hopefully I can come up with 6 or 7 good jokes in a week. And I've had over the years, I'll have one person, I have a guy that also submits ideas to me, and so I'll use his ideas, and he does some good gag writing. So that's kind of how it all works.
Well, that must be being a writer myself. It must be something that's on your mind all the time. You're always thinking
Oh,
about.
right. Right. I always have a sketchbook around, or post-it notes, or something like that that I can just scribble on, scribble an idea on when it comes to me.
From a stress standpoint, as a cartoonist, which is great? Which is the greater stress, making the drawings or coming up with the text that goes with them?
Oh, definitely the idea. An idea can take, well, like a daily comic strip maybe takes me a couple hours to draw, but and coming up with the idea can take anywhere from just seconds, if something just happens to come to you when you wake up, or, hours of just thinking about things. And like I said, some days you come up with nothing, and hopefully other days you come up with a lot you can use.
Yeah, how far ahead do you work? If you're have a schedule, I guess, with your publishers. How far out are you working?
I'm about 9 weeks ahead on the daily comics, and I'm about 12 weeks ahead on the Sunday comics. And with the Sunday comics, I need to be farther ahead like that because of the color.
And there's more production time in that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. So you're 3 or 4 months out. You've got stuff out there now that's ready for the summer almost, right?
Yeah, with
Mhm.
the I'm in May with the Sunday comics. I think I'm still in April with the dailies.
Is that hard also to realize when the publication date is and that you need to be in springtime or summertime when it's published? Is that something you have to be thinking about all the time?
Well, it is kind of funny when, especially like I like to do holiday related gags. And like I said, I did the Snuffy's Christmas Carol this year. But when you're coming up with ideas for Christmas, that's usually like the late summer. So you got Christmas carols playing, or watching Christmas specials on your DVD player or something, in the month of August. But you just get used to it.
Well, if you want some inspiration, you can go to Walmart in late July and their Christmas stuff is
Yeah,
usually out then.
that's
So
very true.
that
Mhm,
might
yeah,
that might help you. Um,
that's true.
when did you discover that you wanted to be a cartoonist? What point in your life or your early development did you say, I want to be a cartoonist, and what inspired you to do that?
Well, really, being a cartoonist is all I can remember that I've ever wanted to be. Um, for example, my mom and dad used to tell me that when I was real young, uh, like I've always been drawing as far as I can remember. But my mom and dad said uh, when I was real young, we were going on a car trip, and I asked my mom to draw a man on a piece of paper, and she drew a stick, like a stick figure and handed it back to me. And I said, "That's not a man," when I looked at it. And she said, "Well, draw your own." And she said, "I've been drawing ever since." So, truthfully, I mean, I grew up, I love the comics, comic books, Saturday morning cartoons, Disney movies, Disney animated films, but especially the comic strips. And it's really just all I wanted to do. So I'm really blessed to get to do it. You know, when I was in, like, as I go through school and stuff, I've got, this is actually like when I was in 5th grade, I wrote a little book. I don't know if you can see that, but it was about a crime solving dog. And you can see that dog looks a lot like a 5th grader's interpretation of Snoopy. So I was a big fan of Snoopy. But yeah, my parents talked to my 5th grade teacher, and then my 5th grade teacher talked to the principal, and the school decided to publish the book. So they published it, and it was back in the days of mimeograph machines. So I don't know if the book read well or looked well, but it smelled really good, you know. But yeah. But yeah, I mean, so even in 5th grade, we had a book signing. I sold some books. I got enough money to pay for my way to go to Boy Scout camp that summer. And I would just always try to, like, do cartoons for the school yearbooks or the school newspaper. And then when I got to college, I did work on staff at the school newspaper, and it's really just all I've wanted to do. So I'm really honored and blessed to get to do it.
Well, I think what you described would be a lot of kids could say what you said in terms of reading the cartoons when you're a kid and watching the Saturday morning cartoons. I mean, I could say the same thing for myself, but you stayed with it. It became your passion, and
Right.
that's kind of you have to have a little bit of kid in you for your whole life to do what you're
That's
doing.
true. Yeah, that's very true. I'm just a big kid. Never grew up.
Did you have a comic strip of your own before you took over Snuffy Smith?
I had submitted lots of comic strips. Nothing really got picked up. I got a lot of nice comments from editors. I submitted them to syndicates. I did have a syndicated children's activity page, and I'd done some kids' books, but Snuffy Smith is the first comic strip that I really started working on once, you know.
So you started in the big time then, didn't you?
Well, I'd had a lot of rejection along the way, but I did end up, you know, getting lucky to get to work with Fred. And then, so I worked with Fred for about 3.5 years as his assistant, and he passed away, and that was 2001. And King Feature Syndicate, who syndicates Snuffy Smith as well as Popeye and Beetle Bailey and others, they gave me an audition. They auditioned my work. They knew that I was his assistant, so I had to send in some samples. And they also I think they auditioned a couple other people, and they ended up liking my work the best. They hired me in 2001, and I've been drawing the comic strip ever since.
So you're 20 something years into this now, aren't you?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
Out of the 100 or so years that Snuffy Smith has been around, you've done about 20% of that.
Yeah, that's right. That's 20 some years would usually be a lot for anybody, but not when you can with this comic strip. It's a drop in the bucket.
Well, now you're a member of something called the National Cartoonist Society, I think. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now tell us about that. What is the National Cartoonist Society, and what do you do as a member of that group?
We're a national organization of cartoonists. We have members from all over the world, really. So it's probably international, I guess I should say. But we have an annual meeting every year. It's called the Rubens. They call it that, named after Rube Goldberg, that cartoonist from years ago. Mm-hmm. And they have awards. They have meetings, and some cartoonists give panels and things like that. And then, so we have a big annual meeting. It's all over the world. Like, last year it was in California. I think this year it's going to be in Boston. And then within the National Cartoonist Society, kind of based on where you live, I'm in rural Virginia. I'm in the Southeast chapter, and so I don't know how many different chapters there are, but there are different chapters all around the country. So then the Southeast chapter, these other chapters will meet a couple other times throughout the year in person. For example, we have Zoom meetings also once a month, mainly just to kind of get together and talk shop. And but then we have a meeting coming up. Actually, that will be in Knoxville. Let's see, that's in April this year, and so we're all coming to Knoxville.
Yeah, our crack Country Roads research team sent me a note
Mhm.
about that you're going to be in Knoxville as part of that group in April. I want to talk to you about Knoxville a little bit. I understand, again, from our crack research team at the Country
Mhm.
Roads, I understand that you go to a children's hospital when you come to Knoxville. And
I did.
yeah, tell us about that. What kind of you do some drawings for some of the kids who are patients there? Is that right?
I did. The last time our group had a meeting there in Knoxville, a bunch of us went to a children's hospital under the leadership of Charlie Daniel, the great editorial cartoonist. He's a good friend of mine and such a great cartoonist.
Well, Charlie, by the
He
way, for their listeners, he's iconic. He has been
he
the
is.
editorial cartoonist for the Knoxville Journal and the Knoxville News Sentinel for many years. I think he's
Mhm.
retired now, but he is
Yeah, I think
he has really built a record and a following there.
right.
Everybody knows who Charlie Daniel is.
That's right.
He's not the devil went down to Georgia. That's a different guy, but
Right. But yeah,
really
I think
is.
he did editorial cartoons there in Knoxville for over 60 years. And
Yes, he did.
such a great person and a great talent. But he organized that. And we went to the children's hospital and a bunch of us, some draw caricatures. I drew, some of the Snuffy Smith characters, for the children. And then I think we're also planning to do the same thing when we have our meeting in April this year. And actually, I think the main focus too. Then I think that's on a Friday. I think the main focus of the meeting then will be Charlie Daniel talking about his wonderful long career. In maybe on Saturday evening, I believe Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening.
Well, you're introducing Snuffy Smith to a whole new generation when you do that. So
Right.
you've got a whole new group of readers and folks who know about Snuffy will be growing up there based on knowing about it based on what you're doing with the hospital.
Right. Yeah. And also I love doing, I do Snuffy Smith chalk talks, and I'll do it to young groups and for young groups, for older groups. And I do a lot in schools. And so hopefully, some younger readers, really get interested in the comic.
Right. Let me ask you this. We talk about Charlie
Sure.
Daniel being a editorial cartoonist, and I think you
Mhm.
said you've done some editorial cartoon work
Mhm.
as well.
Mhm.
What's the difference in the approach that you take when you're doing an editorial cartoon about some topic of public interest that's in the newspaper on the editorial page versus when you're creating a cartoon for the comic strips?
Well, a lot of times with an editorial cartoon, when it's about an issue, you kind of have to take sides on an issue. And I would almost always try to use humor in my cartoons when I drew editorial cartoons. I think Charlie, for the most part, does too. But um, uh, that way, even if people maybe if they don't agree with your point, they get a chuckle out of it, or they think about it a little bit anyway. But then with a comic strip, I'm really just trying to appeal to as many people as I can, and it's just supposed, at least with Snuffy Smith, it's just supposed to be humorous and funny, and hopefully get a laugh or a chuckle or at least a smile.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, I hate to say it, but some people might consider you to be somewhat elite. Some
What? I don't
folks
know.
like me might consider you to be somewhat elite. You're
No.
a graduate of James Madison University with a degree in art and art history, I understand.
Oh,
Uh, so, how does a person who's got that kind of background, how do you prepare yourself to create what people would call hillbilly humor? That's
I,
featured in Snuffy Smith. How do you make that transition?
I'm well, truthfully, I was an art hit. I was a double major in art and art history. But with the comic strip, I don't know. I've always grown up in rural areas, and I've probably toned down some of the hillbilly themes. I know definitely we don't have moonshine anymore, but that was even before I started. Fred stopped that in the late, no, in '96, I think. Um, and but it's mainly just about creating giggles. I think I've heard other cartoonists say so. You just really want to, try to think of things that are funny, and you really get to know the characters, especially after you've been working with them for so long. It's easier to come up with ideas for them. And I've probably softened Snuffy a little bit. I think he cares for Louise maybe a little more, shows affection to her sometimes, and but they have a loving relationship, even though sometimes they'll also fuss and fight. But it's I just try to make people laugh.
Okay, well, that's a worthy goal, and you do it very
Right.
well. Let me
Thank
ask
you.
you this. Charles Schulz, who created Peanuts, became something of a celebrity in
Sure.
in the art world. Everybody knew who
Oh
he
yeah.
was. And he kind of like I said, he had an aura of a celebrity. Do you ever get out front? Are you in the public very much where people would know who you are? You're as a cartoonist, you're very much behind the scenes, but do you find yourself out talking to beyond the hospital, talking to people about the cartoon world? And you have some of that same celebrity?
I would in no way compare myself to Charles Schultz in that way, but I do speak to schools, and I speak to civic groups and business conventions, things like that about the comic strip. I kind of have like an hour long presentation or so, and then I've also taught some classes, some seminars at the college level. Um, Done some special things for college students, teaching. Let's see, that was an animation festival that I went to, and I taught about how to create a Sunday comic strip. So I do like to get out because as a cartoonist, you're in your studio a lot by yourself. So it's nice to get out and interact with fans of the comic strip, folks that read it, and just get their impression of what's going on. So yeah, I enjoy getting out in the community and beyond.
Well, I think people enjoy meeting cartoonists too. I know, like this
Mm-hmm.
conversation here has been very interesting, learning
Well,
more
thank
about,
you.
what you do and how you do it. And everybody knows Snuffy Smith, so to meet the guy behind the scenes is a lot of fun.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
yes, sir. Now we know that over time, this is a 100-year-old comic strip. The characters have been added to Snuffy Smith as time has gone on. Tell us about
Right.
that. And have you added any characters in your 20 years or so as the
Um,
cartoon?
sure. I have added. Let's see. I've got. Oh no, this over here. Sorry. I've added a lot of minor characters. And then I've added one. Let me see. I created a horse. Um, I created one a nice little fun series that we do every year. I don't know if you can see this, but it's this is a Christmas ornament we did, but it's a little horse is Sparkplug the horse. This is his grandson, Lil Sparky, and Lil Sparky appears in the comic strip fairly often, and he's been on lots of different merchandise like the Christmas ornament. And he's probably the one that has endured of all the characters that I've kind of created. But most of all, the cast of characters was very strong when I started the comic strip in back in '98, and then on my own in 2001. So I'm really honored and blessed to get to work with a lot of great characters, established characters. So I didn't have to create too many. But yeah, most of them have been incidental. I would say Little Sparky is probably a little more of a semi-regular character. And then I also one other big change I did, I brought Barney Google and Sparkplug back. They have been absent from the comic strip for a long time, and starting in 2012 or 2013, we started bringing them back for like weeks at a time, week-long series, and they're pretty much like semi-regular characters now. They're in pretty regularly, and it's a lot of fun. It adds a different dynamic, and they're fun characters to work with too.
Well, you mentioned the Christmas ornament. Have you ever seen anybody do a complete Snuffy Smith Christmas tree? Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't seen that. What have you?
I would
Tell
think
me about it.
I think somebody out there would be doing it. Christmas
I
ornament.
know. I don't know. We have done three different ornaments over the years, and but that's all I know. I haven't seen a whole tree, but that'd be something else.
Well, you know, we talked about the 100 years quite a few times here, but it's really quite an accomplishment for a comic strip to have that kind of longevity, to be survive and be popular and growing popularity over that period of time. How do you account for that? What is this kind of the reason for the long running popularity of Snuffy Smith, in your opinion?
Well, first I'd have to say a lot of it, most all of it, I think, is because of great cartoonists like Billy DeBeck and Fred Lasswell and what they built, the set of characters they created. And then like I said, I'm lucky to get to work with them. But I feel like I think the characters are the success to any successful comic strip. Just a good cast of characters that people like to visit with for a few seconds every day in their newspapers or online. After a while, they kind of become like old friends, and you feel like you just want to see them each day. And so I feel like that's a secret. It's all in the characters that are there. And Billy and Fred really created some great characters.
Well, one of my daughters was reminding me this week when I was talking about this, getting together on this, that her grandfather used to read Snuffy Smith to her from the Sunday funny papers every week, and she would sit on his lap and he would read Snuffy
Right.
Smith.
That's
Tribute.
That's wonderful. What a wonderful memory. Yeah.
No. Well, let me ask you this last thing in closing, and thank you for your time today, John.
Oh, well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, I've really enjoyed the conversation. Let me ask you this last question. When it's your turn to pass Snuffy Smith the baton or the brush on to the next artist, what advice would you have for him or her as far as carrying on this century-old tradition?
I just think you need to just stay true to the characters. I mean, I have no plans to do that anytime soon. As long as this hand will let me, I'll keep drawing as much as I can. But I just think you need to stay true to the characters and be as creative as you can be. And I feel like that if you do that, I think the comic strip will just continue on as long as there's newspapers, and even if there aren't newspapers anymore, online resources or whatever platform that's out there at the time. I hope comics will always be around no matter what the platform is. Like I said, whether it's papers or whether it's on tablets or somewhere else that I don't even know about at this time, 10 years from now.
Yeah, I think we all share that. We all hope to be able to continue to see the comics because they give us a break, and they're very very entertaining. And Snuffy Smith is right up there at the top.
Thank you.
You're a great successor to Billy DeBeck and Fred Lasswell, and now we have John Rose in the driver's seat. And thank you for all you're doing to keep Snuffy Smith alive and for keeping us entertained. We sure appreciate it. And thanks for being on the Country Road Detours today. We appreciate
Well, sure. Absolutely. I'd like to thank you so much for having me. And then I'd also like to thank our Snuffy Smith readers, the folks that read it every day. I'd like to thank King Features, my syndicate, and my family. And I'm just bodaciously blessed. That's what I always say, to get to do this every day. And I just want to thank everyone for that.
All right. Well, thank you again, and hope we get to talk again soon. We really enjoyed it.
All right. That'd be great. Thank you.